Well, hey, this is fun to get to be with you. And let me ask, how many of you were here last month? You're the pioneers in this thing. And how many of you is this the first time? There we go. So about a 50-50 thing. So the first time people, can we just make a deal right here? Do not judge this wonderful deal on the basis of the presenter tonight, okay? Just, that okay with you? Because I've heard about who might be coming next month and the next month and the next month, and they're really going to be good. I know them all. So if tonight's kind of going down this a little bit, just make sure you come back next month. You'll do that, won't you? Hey, we just heard Marcus Buckingham. Wouldn't all of you like to follow Marcus Buckingham? Getting to speak? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Highest regard. How many of you have done Strengths Finders 2.0? There we go. Yeah, and how many of you that you haven't done that yet? Yeah, it's probably one of the cheapest ways that you can make yourself look smarter, right there. Just go down and buy the book, and you cut out the little back, and you can go online, and it gives you a little code, and after 15, 20 minutes online, it gives you your strengths. And I'm intentionally going to be talking about that a little bit tonight, not only because Marcus is starting us off, but because that's been such a really very, very helpful tool for me. And want to kind of share with you about how I integrate that. Well, hey, let me mention this. Part of the promo of a presentation on the Facebook site about tonight was that you'd get to hear about some things that are interesting to me. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that good marketing right there? So Jared gets to talk about what he wants to talk about tonight. I know that I'm officially an old guy when I'm invited to come talk about whatever I want to talk about. So happy to own it. Grandpa, 7.5 months. They're making grandfathers so cool and young now. I just couldn't believe that could possibly be the case, but I am an old guy. Well, let me tell you about a paradox that I live with. And really, I want to take a few minutes to kind of unpack with you, and then we're going to turn into our groups and talk about it a little bit. The paradox is I'm an entrepreneurial person. I figured that out fairly young in life. I assume that you are as well, regardless of what you're doing right now, professionally, vocationally. I assume that we have entrepreneurial tendencies. We want our freedom, we want flexibility, we want spontaneity, we want fluidity, right? That's what the entrepreneur wants. We do not want to be in a controlling, constraining environment. We want freedom. So I want to retain that. I'm an entrepreneurial type. I want to be an extremely committed type, which is the second dimension of the three-dimensional paradox. I want to have deep, long commitments in my relationship with God and with people. Deep, long commitments, by definition, are not fluid, spontaneous, changing. They're commitments. There's a paradox here. I'm an entrepreneurial person who wants to make and keep long-term relational commitments. And then the third dimension is I want to live a healthy, sustainable life. That's the third dimension of the paradox. Entrepreneurial spirit, freedom, flexibility, spontaneity, fluidity, long-term commitments, relationship with God and with people, and put that paradox together in a lifestyle that is healthy and sustainable. And I've been thinking about that for a while. And I'm not the master of that, but I've come up with some things that have been helpful for me in managing that. And I call that the good life, and the title of this talk tonight is The Good Life, and I think you've gotten some outlines that are there. And by the way, can I mention that there's just 3 dangerous things that can happen with the outline. The first is you've already looked at it and decided whether or not you want to listen to me, and that's just a bad thing to do. So I have to live with that, and so do you, because I'm closer to the door than you, and it's really rude and indiscreet to slip out early. So if you finish before I do, I've already checked it out. There's an exit back there that really is discreet, can be like a one-way ticket to the restroom, and so that'll work out. The second reason this is dangerous is that this is my story, it's not your story. I had to think about, do I want to present my model tonight? First of all, it can look pretty arrogant. This is what I've come up with, this is my life, isn't it cool? But more dangerous than that is that you could adopt this as yours. What I can guarantee is it will really feel awkward to try to adopt my clothes. They're just not that well-fitting for you. But the third thing that's dangerous about what's on this little page is that if you do adapt it and make it work for you as a model, it potentially will revolutionize your life. That's the danger if it actually works for you. So I've given you all the disclaimers. It comes at your own risk tonight as we talk about the good life. And Kathy Nelson, who is a friend and world-class coach and trainer and business networker right here, at points in our friendship, asked me a great question. I think a guy named Dr. Phil likes to ask it. It's a fair question. So how's that working for you? And I'm happy to tell you tonight that this is working well for me. So hear from an old guy, some stuff that I've ground out in life that really is working as I'm managing the paradox of how to be an entrepreneurial person, living with very deep lifetime commitments in a lifestyle that I want to be healthy and sustainable. I found that there's three really big deals in life to me, and I want to start with this foundation with you. The first learning that I've made is this. It really is about loving God and loving people. It really is about relationships. And that is the thing that's going to last. It really isn't attainments and acquisitions and accolades and stuff. It really is about loving God and loving people. A wise man that we all love dearly once said that in much more glowing terms, didn't he? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is the first and greatest command. If you do this, all of the law and the Old Testament prophets are wrapped up into that. It really is true. It really is about relationships. The second big deal that I've learned is that transformation is the goal. That's the big deal. I want to be more like Jesus when I go to bed tonight than when I started this morning. And that has happened for me today. I got to meet Sherry Anderson, and Sherry is right here. Sherry, raise your hand again so we all see Sherry. Sherry Anderson, we met at 1:30 today. We had a delightful 1-hour conversation. I am more like Jesus today for having met Sherry Anderson than I was before. It really is all about transformation. The good days, the bad guys, the days, the ill-fitting roles, the wonderful roles, it really is about being conformed to the likeness and image of God's dear Son. Romans 8:29 is the verse on that one. And the third thing, big thing that I've learned before we launch in, is that time is the limiting resource. Time is the limiting resource. It isn't money. You can raise money. It isn't talent. You don't even have to develop the talent. You can rent talent from other people. It really is time. That is the limiting resource. And I love what Paul writes to the church at Ephesians in chapter 4 and 5 about time and making the most of our time and being wise about the time and not wasting the time, because that really is the big deal. So take it from the old guy. The three big things that I've learned about managing the paradox in life is that loving God and loving people is the big deal. That transformation really is the goal of God's working in my life and yours. And time is the limiting resource all the time. So I beginning to figure out some of this stuff in life, and I'm going, well, if time is the limiting resource, I should become an expert in time management, right? So how many of you have gone to a time management seminar, taken a course? And, yeah. Some of you done time management seminars? You've given the courses for others? Yeah. I've been through more time management kinds of systems. I mean, hard stuff and software. I've done the whole thing and became a student of time management. I've given seminars on time management. And time management actually worked. I could do more things in the limited resource of time. But can I make a confession to you as a recovering time management junkie? It was really boring. Really, really boring. Really boring. I was good at it. I love what Marcus said. Just because we're good at it doesn't mean that that's a strength. Really boring. Not very creative. Yes, I was cramming more stuff into time. I was more efficient and maybe more effective, but it was just such a boring approach. And that's when I stumbled across Stephen Covey, who unbelievably, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, still a bestseller. I mean, he's even older than I am. It's just amazing. And the reason it's a bestseller is because he identified something that made a lot of sense to a whole lot of us. And the something is this. it makes a lot more sense to start with who you are, being, than what you do, doing. That's why it makes so much sense. Now, of course, that's all truth is God's truth. God probably thought that was a good idea before Stephen Covey did. And what Covey did was he just put it in operational and functional terms. He said, don't start with what you do, start with who you are. And he put a four-letter word with that, role. Start with your roles. And that was revolutionary for me. I'd really never thought about my life in terms of roles, which are an extension of who we are as people, not primarily an extension of what we do in terms of activities. Who we are as people. And after I did the discipline thing, which was very, very difficult, because he says, you know, as you jot down all of your roles, and how many of you have done this, the role kind of thing? Many of you have, yeah. And he says, you know, you jot down your roles, you're probably going to end up with 50. Some people end up with 100 different roles in life. And then you have to do the hard work, don't you? Because he says you can only have 7 of them. You only have 7 roles. And you start sorting, and you start mixing and blending and rephrasing, and you're still left with more roles. And the hard work is the discipline of shaving them off from the bottom up until you end up with just 7 roles. And those roles, if well written, are identity statements, kind of like Jesus I am statements in the book of John. I am the good shepherd. That is a role identity statement. Coming up with those roles, and then as I did that, and because I'm a value-based person, and because I'm a practice-based person, and out of those things come goals, I ended up with a simple little template that you have in front of you, which is the identification of a value and a role that it's related to, and practices that I'm going to engage in that come out of those. And it makes it a very simple template for me. When I do some annual planning around the end of the year, the first of the year, I'm going to come up with some goals. I'm entrepreneurial, so it needs to be fresh and new and different and flexible and dynamic. I can come here and I can say, what's really important to life in terms of my values? And what does that look like in terms of what I'm called to do, in terms of my primary roles in the lives of other people? And then what are practices that I do that supports this person that I am in this area of my life? And what would it look like for me this year to have some fresh goals that come directly out of those roles? And so I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about those, but first I want to let you in and hear about comments you have, or experiences that you had that you'd like to share, or questions that you'd like to have, or really I'd love just for you to challenge me and say, Jared, I think you're really out in left field on that one. So who wants to jump in first? Let's talk.